You never listen to me. This is exactly why we can't move trees. That's not your fault. Both of you stop.
This isn't helping.
August 14th, 2023. A quiet neighborhood in southwest Atlanta. At 9:47 p.m., 20 gunshots shattered the summer night. Inside a modest brick home on Cascade Road, 2 bodies lay sprawled across the living room floor. A 48-year-old police officer, a 19-year-old college student, and the shooter, not a stranger, not a burglar, but the officer's own son. But stop and think about that for a moment. What could push a man to aim a gun at his own father? What kind of betrayal cuts so deep that it turns love into murder? And what about those 20 bullets? Why not 1? Why not 5? Why 20? Would you call it murder? Or would you call it the breaking point of a son who had already lost everything that mattered? If it were you, betrayed by your father, betrayed by the woman you loved, what would you have done? Welcome to True Crime's Altar. I'm taking you inside one of the most shocking cases Atlanta has ever seen. So lean in, because what unfolded inside that house didn't just end 2 lives, it destroyed a family legacy built over 2 decades. This is the story of Trevor Hayes, a 24-year-old man whose life ended up at the center of one of the most disturbing crimes Georgia had ever witnessed. His father, Officer Raymond Hayes, was 48, still wearing his badge with pride after 22 years of service. To the city, he was a hero. To his son, he was everything. Raymond had raised Trevor alone since 2007, when Trevor's mother, Charlene, left one October morning with nothing but a suitcase and a note that said she couldn't do it anymore. Trevor was 8 then. He came home from school to find his father sitting at the kitchen table, the note crushed in his hand, his eyes red but his posture unbroken. From that day forward, it was just the 2 of them. Raymond made it his mission to be both father and mother, to give Trevor everything she didn't. He cooked breakfast before every shift, helped with homework after, never missed a school event. Neighbors on Cascade Road remembered them shooting hoops in the driveway, Raymond's laughter echoing down the block. They looked like the perfect father and son. But love, when it becomes obsession, turns sharp. Raymond didn't just raise Trevor, he held on to him. He needed to know everything, where he was, who he was with, when he'd be home. Even after Trevor turned 18 and started college at Georgia State, the calls came twice a day. Protective to some, controlling to others. To Trevor, it was just normal. He'd never known freedom. By 2023, he was 24, a music production graduate who hadn't found his break. He spent his days in the basement studio his father helped him build, making beats, chasing dreams, and working part-time at a guitar center in Midtown to stay afloat. Raymond supported him on the surface, bragged to his colleagues about his son's talent, but at the dinner table his tone changed. You need a backup plan, son. Music's fine, but you can't eat off dreams. Trevor would nod, swallow the sting, and let it go. Because Raymond was still his hero, the man who stayed when his mother didn't, the man who gave up everything to raise him. Then came December 2022. That's when Trevor met Jasmine Cole, a 19-year-old freshman at Clark Atlanta University. She was studying nursing, bright and soft-spoken, with long braids that swung when she laughed. They met at a house party in the West End. Trevor was drawn to her quiet warmth, her gentle smile. Within minutes, they were talking like old friends. Jasmine told him about her dream of becoming a pediatric nurse, how she wanted to help kids who came from broken homes like hers. Trevor told her about his music, his plans, his father's faith in him. By New Year's, they were inseparable. Jasmine's life hadn't been easy. She grew up in Decatur with a single mother who worked double shifts and a father who was in and out of prison. She'd learned early not to depend on anyone. That's why Trevor's steady presence meant so much. He called when he said he would. He showed up. He listened. For the first time in her life, Jasmine felt safe. By March 2023, Trevor brought her home to meet Raymond. She arrived in jeans and a Clark Atlanta hoodie, nervous but polite. "Officer Hayes, it's nice to meet you," she said, offering her hand. Raymond smiled. "Call me Raymond. Officer Hayes makes me feel old." They talked for an hour, about school, her future, her plans after graduation. When she left, Raymond clapped his son on the shoulder. "She seems sweet." Just make sure she's serious about her future. It sounded like fatherly advice, but something in his tone carried weight Trevor didn't understand. Weeks passed. Jasmine became part of the routine. She visited often, stayed for dinner, helped Raymond in the kitchen while Trevor worked in the basement. Sometimes, Raymond drove her home after she missed the last MARTA train. Trevor didn't think much of it. His dad was just being helpful. But then came the messages. Late-night texts from Raymond asking if she was safe, if she'd eaten, if she wanted to talk. She told herself it was fatherly, but the tone began to change. Compliments slipped in. You looked beautiful today. You deserve more than you think. It confused her. It scared her. But a small, lonely part of her liked the attention. By late May, boundaries blurred. Raymond had become her confidant, the man she vented to about stress, school, and even Trevor. He listened, soothed, and slowly rewrote the lines between concern and seduction. Then one night in June, Jasmine missed her period. A pregnancy test confirmed what she feared. Positive. She did the math. It didn't match Trevor. It matched Raymond. She broke down, terrified, and called the only person she thought could help, the man who caused it. At 10:42 p.m., they met in his car in a dark lot off Memorial Drive. She handed him the test with trembling hands. Raymond stared at it for a long time, jaw tight, knuckles white. We'll handle this quietly, he said. Trevor doesn't need to know. His voice was flat, cold. Jasmine sobbed. You mean get rid of it? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I'll pay for it, he said. We'll fix this. He wasn't comforting her anymore. He was protecting himself. The weeks that followed were tense. Jasmine pulled away from Trevor, avoiding calls, blaming school and stress. He sensed something was off but couldn't name it. At dinner, his father grew quieter, distracted. He stared at his phone, jaw clenched. Trevor asked if everything was fine. Raymond snapped, I'm fine. Drop it. On August 12, 2023, Jasmine showed up at the house for the first time in weeks. Trevor was upstairs when he heard voices downstairs, urgent, angry. She's not going through with it, Raymond hissed. She wants to keep it. Trevor froze at the top of the stairs. Jasmine's voice trembled. I can't do it, Raymond. It's not right. You think telling Trevor is right? He barked. You think destroying this family is right? Trevor's heart pounded. He crept closer. Then Jasmine said the words that shattered his world. It's your baby, Raymond. Not his. He didn't remember walking down the stairs. Suddenly he was standing there, staring at both of them. His father's face drained of color. Jasmine burst into tears. Trevor, I can explain. Don't, he whispered. Raymond raised his hands like a cop approaching a suspect. Son, let's talk about this. But Trevor's chest was tight, his mind roaring. He turned, walked upstairs, and opened the closet safe. He knew the code, his birthday. Inside was his father's Glock 22. He gripped the gun, the betrayal screaming in his ears. He walked back down. Raymond stepped forward. Trevor, put it down. Trevor's voice shook. You took everything from me. Raymond tried again. I'm your father. Trevor's voice broke. You stopped being my father when you touched her. The first shot hit Raymond in the chest. Jasmine screamed. Trevor kept firing. 6 shots. 7. 8. Raymond collapsed against the couch. The gun clicked empty. He reloaded. Jasmine crawled toward the door, begging. Please, Trevor, I'm sorry. He pointed the gun. You were supposed to love me. 8 more shots. Silence. At 9:52 p.m., Trevor dialed 911. His voice was shaking. I just killed my father and my girlfriend. Sirens wailed minutes later. He walked outside, hands raised, blood on his shirt, and surrendered without a fight. By the time officers arrived at 9:58 p.m., the house on Cascade Road was a war zone. 20 shell casings littered the living room floor. Blood soaked the carpet, smeared the walls, and pooled under the bodies. Officer Raymond Hayes was dead before paramedics arrived. 19-year-old Jasmine Cole had been shot 8 times, dying instantly. Trevor sat on the curb outside, hands cuffed, eyes hollow, whispering the same words over and over. I killed them. I killed them both. Neighbors stood on their porches in disbelief. Miss Lorraine Jenkins, who lived next door, shook her head as officers led him to the patrol car. That boy was polite, she whispered. Always said yes, ma'am. What could have made him do this? The news spread through the Atlanta Police Department before dawn. By sunrise, every station in the city was running the headline, "Decorated officer killed by his own son." Raymond's badge photo appeared beside Trevor's mugshot, two faces that looked so much alike it was hard to believe one had destroyed the other. Detective Phyllis Monroe, 42, sharp and relentless, took the case. She'd known Raymond casually from her early years on the force. When she stepped into the house that morning, the sight hit her like a punch. Blood on the walls, a badge among the shell casings, 2 lives gone, 1 family erased. 20 rounds, she muttered to her partner, Detective Luis Vargas. That's not anger. That's devastation. At the Fulton County Jail, Trevor sat across from Monroe in a gray interrogation room, wrists chained to the table. He looked exhausted, his eyes swollen from crying. Monroe hit record. Tell us what happened. For a long time he said nothing. Then his voice broke. They were arguing downstairs. My dad and Jasmine. About a baby. She said it was his, not mine. He swallowed hard. I lost it. Monroe leaned forward. You're saying your father was having a relationship with your girlfriend? Trevor nodded. He was supposed to be helping her, talking to her about school. But it turned into something else. His eyes went distant. I heard her say it. I heard her call him by his name. Raymond. Not Mr. Hayes. Not Officer Hayes. Raymond. That's when I knew. Monroe asked why he fired 20 times. Trevor looked up. Because one wouldn't have been enough. Over the next 3 days, Monroe and Vargas pieced the story together. They pulled text records, phone logs, and credit card statements. What they found confirmed Trevor's story. More than 400 messages between Raymond and Jasmine. At first, they were innocent. Advice, encouragement, check-ins. Then the tone shifted. You looked beautiful today. I can't stop thinking about last night. You make me feel alive again. Jasmine's replies started hesitant, then softened into complicity. We shouldn't be doing this. You said you'd keep me safe. I miss you. Then came the credit card statements. Raymond had checked into a Motel 6 3 times between late May and mid-June. Each time, Jasmine's phone pinged from the same location. Monroe stared at the printout. He was grooming her, she said. Vargas nodded grimly. And it worked. The medical examiner confirmed what they already suspected. Jasmine had been 8 weeks pregnant. DNA tests later proved Raymond was the father. The department was stunned. The man they'd mourned as a fallen hero was suddenly the subject of scandal. Internal Affairs opened an investigation. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who'd been Raymond's supervisor, addressed the precinct with shaking hands. Ray was a brother to us. But the evidence is the evidence. We have to face what he did. On August 21st, Police Chief Harold Briggs held a press conference. Cameras clicked as he stepped to the podium. While we mourn Officer Hayes' death, we cannot ignore the evidence that has come to light. His actions were unacceptable and a betrayal of his badge and his family. Reporters shouted questions, but Briggs ended it quickly. We failed to protect a young woman who trusted one of our own. Public reaction was divided. On social media, some called Trevor a murderer, others called him a victim. One post read, "He killed his dad and his girl, no excuse." Another answered, "His dad got his girlfriend pregnant. What would you have done?" The city split into camps. Justice for Trevor. Justice for Raymond and Jasmine. At Clark Atlanta University, students held a candlelight vigil for Jasmine. Her roommate, Janelle Price, spoke through tears. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted to help people. She made mistakes, but she didn't deserve this. In the crowd, some whispered, she was sleeping with her boyfriend's dad. Janelle turned and snapped, "You don't know what happened." The whispers kept spreading. Jasmine's mother, Denise Cole, identified her body 2 days later. When the sheet was pulled back, she collapsed to her knees. "That's my baby," she cried. The funeral was held on August 23 in a small Baptist church in Decatur. Only a few dozen people came. Reporters lingered outside. When asked if she blamed Trevor, Denise said softly, "I blame them all. Him for what he did, my daughter for trusting the wrong man, and myself for not seeing the signs." Meanwhile, Trevor sat in solitary confinement at Fulton County Jail. Officers kept him separate for his own safety. Too many cops had ties to Raymond. His court-appointed lawyer, Shayla Hughes, visited him on August 25. "The evidence is stacked," she told him. "You called 911. You confessed. They'll push for life without parole. Maybe the death penalty." Trevor stared at the table. "I'm not denying what I did." Shayla leaned forward. "Then we have to focus on why. We argue passion, not malice. Betrayal, not premeditation." Over the next hour, Trevor told her everything. His mother leaving, his father's control, his music, Jasmine, the moment he overheard them. Shayla took notes. "The prosecution will say you had time to think. You reloaded." Trevor's voice was hollow. "I did. And I still don't know why I didn't stop." Shayla sighed. "We'll argue emotional collapse. It's the only shot you have." Then, in early September, a woman named Tasha Wilkins walked into Detective Monroe's office. She looked nervous, clutching her bag. "I saw the news about Raymond Hayes," she said. "I dated him 3 years ago." Monroe listened as Tasha described their relationship. "He was controlling, jealous. He'd show up at my job, go through my phone. When I tried to leave, he told me no one else would want me. I believed him. I was scared." Monroe asked why she'd come forward. Tasha's eyes filled with tears. "Everyone's calling that boy a monster. But if Raymond did to that girl what he did to me, then maybe Trevor had a reason." Monroe took her statement to the district attorney's office. Prosecutor Gerald Mathis wasn't moved. "Raymond Hayes is dead," he said flatly. "Trevor killed him. End of story." Monroe argued, "This establishes a pattern of manipulation." Mathis shook his head. "Patterns don't justify murder. We'll charge him with 2 counts of malice murder." By September 18th, the city had become a courtroom of its own. Online forums buzzed. Protests broke out. Some carried signs that said, "Free Trevor." Others read, "Justice for Jasmine." Outside the Fulton County Courthouse, arguments erupted between supporters and opponents. "You don't kill your father," one woman shouted. A man fired back, "You don't sleep with your son's girlfriend." Police stood between them, silent and tense. When the trial opened on February 5, 2024, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every seat. Trevor entered in shackles, thinner, pale, wearing a borrowed suit. Protesters outside chanted both for and against him. Judge Ernestine Collier took her seat and warned the gallery to stay quiet. Prosecutor Mathis began. "This case is about murder. Cold, deliberate murder." The defendant walked upstairs, retrieved his father's service weapon, came back down, and fired 20 shots. 12 into his father. 8 into a 19-year-old girl. That is not a man who snapped. That is a man who chose to kill. He paused, letting the numbers sink in. Whatever Officer Hayes did, it doesn't justify execution. Then Shayla rose for the defense. "My client does not deny what he did. But you must understand why he did it. He was raised by a father who controlled every part of his life, who taught him about loyalty and trust, and then violated both in the most devastating way possible. That man betrayed his own son and his son's girlfriend, a young woman he manipulated and impregnated. Trevor Hayes did not wake up that day planning to kill anyone. He broke." The jury sat silent, their eyes fixed on Trevor. Over the next week, the prosecution presented evidence. The text messages, the autopsy, the 911 call. Detective Monroe testified. "The scene was execution style," she said. Shayla objected. The judge sustained it. But the image was already painted. The medical examiner, Dr. Harold Chin, described the wounds in detail. 12 bullets in Raymond Hayes, most to the chest and abdomen. 8 in Jasmine Cole, including 3 to the back. Mathis asked, would she have been able to move after the first few shots? No, Chin replied. The shots to her torso were instantly incapacitating. When the recording of Trevor's 911 call played, the courtroom went silent. His voice trembled through the speakers. I just killed my father and my girlfriend. Denise Cole wept in the front row. Trevor didn't look up. The prosecution rested its case. Then it was the defense's turn. Shayla called Jasmine's roommate, Janelle. She testified that Jasmine once told her she'd made a mistake and was terrified of Raymond. Then she called Tasha Wilkins, who described her own experience with Raymond's controlling behavior. It was risky, but it planted a seed, the image of a man who abused his authority. On the 9th day, Shayla called Trevor himself. He spoke softly, staring at his hands. He was everything to me. My father. My hero. I thought he could do no wrong. Then I found out what he'd done, and something inside me broke. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just wanted the pain to stop. When Mathis cross-examined, his tone turned cold. You fired 12 times. Then you reloaded. Then you fired 8 more. That's not a blackout, Mr. Hayes. That's control. Trevor's eyes filled. Maybe. But I wasn't in control of my heart. Mathis pressed harder. You shot a 19-year-old girl while she crawled toward the door. You remember that? Trevor whispered, yes. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of his voice. Closing arguments began on February 20, 2024. The air in the courtroom felt heavy. Prosecutor Mathis stood before the jury, his voice calm but sharp. The defense wants you to believe this was emotion, not murder. But the evidence shows intention. Trevor Hayes went upstairs, retrieved a weapon, returned, and executed 2 people. He had time to stop. He had time to think. He didn't. He fired until the gun was empty, reloaded, and fired again. That's not confusion. That's control. What Raymond Hayes did was wrong. But betrayal does not justify execution. He paused and turned toward Trevor. He chose rage over reason. And now 2 people are dead. Then Shayla rose for the defense. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion. This isn't about denying what happened. It's about understanding it. Trevor Hayes was a young man whose entire life was built around loyalty to a father who raised him, controlled him, and finally destroyed him. That betrayal, his father's affair with his 19-year-old girlfriend, didn't just hurt him. It shattered his mind. He wasn't thinking about the law. He wasn't thinking about punishment. He was watching his world collapse. That isn't malice. It's devastation. She looked directly at the jury. This was a crime of passion, not premeditation. And it's a tragedy that began long before the first shot was fired. The jury began deliberations that afternoon. For 3 days, they reviewed the evidence, listened again to the 911 call, and argued over motive, intent, and emotion. On February 22, 2024, at 2:17 p.m., they returned. Judge Collier asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor." The room went silent. In the case of the state of Georgia versus Trevor Hayes, on the charge of malice murder in the death of Raymond Hayes, we find the defendant not guilty. On the lesser included charge of voluntary manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. On the charge of malice murder in the death of Jasmine Cole, we find the defendant not guilty. On the lesser included charge of voluntary manslaughter, we find the defendant guilty. Gasps filled the air. Denise Cole collapsed in tears. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Judge Collier banged her gavel. "Order in this court." Trevor sat motionless. Shayla placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering something no one could hear. Outside, the city exploded with opinions. Some called the verdict justice. Others called it mercy gone wrong. One headline read, "Cop's son escapes life sentence." Another said, "Atlanta jury sees betrayal, not murder." Comment sections turned into battlefields. He should have gotten life. He was pushed to the edge. She was a victim. She was complicit. Everyone had an opinion. No one had peace. Sentencing was set for March 8, 2024. The courtroom was quieter that day. The frenzy had cooled, replaced by a somber understanding that this story had no winners. Shayla argued for leniency. He's shown remorse. He has no prior record. He called 911. He surrendered. He'll carry the weight of this forever. Prosecutor Mathis demanded the maximum. 2 lives were taken. 2 families destroyed. That cannot be softened. When it was Trevor's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his hands trembling. I want to say I'm sorry. To Jasmine's family. To my father's friends. To everyone I hurt. What I did was wrong. There's no excuse for it. I took 2 lives and I'll live with that forever. My father wasn't perfect, but he didn't deserve to die. Jasmine made mistakes, but she didn't deserve to die. I wish I could take it back. His voice cracked, and he sat down, tears falling freely. Judge Collier was quiet for a long time before she spoke. Mr. Hayes, the court recognizes the pain, betrayal, and psychological damage that led to this crime. But while context explains behavior, it does not erase responsibility. You had moments when you could have stopped, and you didn't. The jury found you guilty of voluntary manslaughter, not malice murder. That means they believed your actions were driven by emotional collapse, not intent. This court agrees. I hereby sentence you to 20 years for each count, to be served consecutively. 40 years in total. You will be eligible for parole after 30. The gavel fell. 40 years. In the gallery, reactions split. Denise Cole buried her face in her hands. Some of Raymond's former colleagues nodded grimly. Others turned away. Miss Lorraine Jenkins, sitting near the back, whispered, "That boy's life is over. One way or another." Trevor was taken back to Fulton County Jail that evening, then transferred to Georgia State Prison in Reedsville a week later. He entered the system as a first-time offender, medium security. In prison, he kept to himself, working in the library, shelving books, helping others write appeals. He attended therapy twice a week, trying to make sense of what couldn't be undone. He wrote letters to Denise Cole apologizing, but they came back unopened. He wrote to his father's former partner, trying to explain. That one came back too. The media eventually moved on, but the echoes of the case lingered. Every August 14th, officers from Zone 3 gathered for a memorial to honor Raymond Hayes. Some spoke of him as a hero who died in service. Others struggled with the truth they'd learned about him. He was a good cop, one said quietly, but a broken man. In Decatur, Denise visited Jasmine's grave every Sunday. She'd bring flowers, sit on the grass, and talk to her daughter as if she were still listening. "You should have been a nurse by now," she'd whisper. "You should have had a good life." She never remarried. She never left Atlanta. The grief stayed like a shadow she learned to live with. For Trevor, time moved differently. In the quiet of his cell, he replayed that night over and over, the voices downstairs, the sound of the gun, the silence after. In 2025, a journalist from a true crime podcast visited Reedsville and interviewed him through a thick pane of glass. When asked if he still thought about that night, Trevor said, "Every day. I see their faces when I close my eyes. I hear the gunshots. I remember everything." The journalist asked if he felt justified. He shook his head. "No. There's no justification for what I did. I was hurt, but that doesn't make it right. If I could go back, I'd walk away. They weren't worth my life. And they weren't worth theirs." When the interview aired in March 2025, the debate reignited. Some praised his honesty. Others said he was manipulating sympathy. One headline read, "Trevor Hayes speaks from prison, no excuses." On social media, arguments flared again. He's a murderer. He's a victim. He's both. By 2026, the case had faded from headlines but not from memory. In Atlanta, people still mentioned it when betrayal came up in conversation. "Remember that cop's son who lost it?" someone would say, and everyone would nod. The Hayes case had become more than a story. It was a mirror of trust, control, and the price of silence. Trevor marked his 3rd year in prison quietly. He read constantly, wrote music lyrics he couldn't record, and kept a single photo of himself and his father, taken years before any of it happened. Two smiling faces in a driveway, basketball between them, sunlight on their shoulders. Sometimes he'd look at it for hours, wondering how a love so strong could turn into something that destroyed them both. And maybe that's the point. Some betrayals don't just break you. They erase you. They erase families, futures, and everything that came before. For Trevor Hayes, that night in August 2023 never ended. It just replayed in his mind, over and over, for the rest of his life. So I'll leave you with this. Was he a murderer or a victim? A monster or a broken man? If it were you, your father, your lover, your betrayal, would you have walked away? Or would you have snapped the way he did? There are no easy answers. Only pain, regret, and the echo of 20 gunshots on a quiet street in southwest Atlanta. You've been watching True Crimes Alter. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember, betrayal doesn't just break hearts. It destroys lives.